a scoring problem in today's NBA? I think I'll start. I think one of the biggest issues with today's NBA is just the way it's officiated. I think the refs are. A lot of people have been complaining about them this season. Not even as much about just their quality, but the calls that they're making that favor certain players like Joel Embiid and other players like that who. And it's not a knock on them. They're smart enough to have figured out a new method to have high scoring and get to the free throw line. And that's part of why the NBA has just become such a high scoring atmosphere. It's harder to play defense. The free throws aren't necessarily higher than they were, but the officiating and the rules, taking out the hand check a while ago, players have just gotten so much smarter. And just an example, I mean, a few weeks ago, Domantas Sabonis had 35, 18, and 12, or a stat line similar to that, and Fox in the same game scored 41 points, and the Kings lost to the Suns. So, I mean, 15 years ago, if those two stat lines were in the same game, people would say it was an all-time performance. Nowadays, it's an everyday occurrence, and half the time these teams lose. How many times this year have we had 60-point performances that resulted in losses? We had Cat scored 62 and lost. Devin Booker has scored 60 and lost this season. In the All-Star game, Cat scored 50 and lost. It's just the scoring is, I don't even want to say out of control because the players are just so good, but is it going to continue on this trajectory, or are we at a peak? What do you guys think?
Yeah, one thing that you pointed out there for sure is players getting to the line a ton. So obviously you got guys like Embiid and Luka, and especially Harden back there at the late 2010s, early 2020s. Harden was going to the line 10 to 15 times a game, I think, something like that. I mean, when he was averaging 36 points a game in 2019, he was going to the line an absurd amount of times. But what you're pointing up there too with the all-time statistics right there with like Sabonis putting up 30 and 15 with like 11 rebounds in a game, with Fox putting up 41. That would have been a historic game 10 years ago. So growing up, I mean, when I was a kid, I'd be looking at some of these box scores and say, oh, that guy had 40 points. You know, like that would be.
And it was an anomaly.
Exactly, it was an anomaly. That would be really impressive. I remember
50 is on a weekly basis now.
Exactly. Like when Dirk, there was a game in the playoffs, I think in the conference finals in 2011 during their legendary run, where Dirk put up 48 in like one of those playoff games, and it was just a legendary performance. He went off. Yep. And back then, that was seen as like, wow, that's like an all-time legendary performance. And now you're seeing guys put up 50, 60, even 70. Like you had Booker put up 70 in the mid-2010s. Then after that, you had Mitchell put up 71, Dame put up 71, Luka putting up 73, Embiid putting up 70 as well. So it's kind of diminishing, I guess, what the amount of points players score and like how it's viewed, I guess. Yep. When Kobe put up that 81, that was viewed as just legendary. That was just one of the best games ever played. But now it's kind of feeling like it's inevitable that that's going to get broken soon, but it's not going to feel the same as it did in the past.
Yes. That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, as far as excuse me, as far as general scoring, it always fluctuates. So like in the mid 80s, there was a period with the Pistons before they had their dynasty, when they had Kelly Tripucka and John Long, and they would score 120 or so every night. And Alex English's Nuggets would score 120 a night, which is about on pace for, say, 2020.
Yeah.
And it was some stat like that where it was the same exact scoring average, 1985 versus, say, 2020. So as far as the general scoring, that'll always probably be somewhat similar as far as just, final scores. But as far as just these individual efforts, you guys already outlined it very well. It's getting pretty out of control, because I remember days when we would be in middle school or something, and you'd come into class and people would be talking about, well, this guy had a triple-double, That never happens, somebody had a triple-double. Now it's like, which role player had a near 30-point triple-double tonight?
Yeah.
And I have a quick list here just to read a couple names. This is just from last night's games. Kyle Kuzma had 31 and 12. Who cares? Devin Vassell had 32 and 7 assists. And then obviously for the superstars, Jokic had a perfect triple-double, heavy triple-double, 19 and 15.
15 game.
Yeah.
And then Shea had the 63% shooting, 31 point and 8 rebound game. Luka had 41, 9, 11, as Raul already mentioned. I mean, Sabonis had another triple-double, and that was just all last night.
This is in one night. After All-Star break, where a lot of players are coming back, relaxed. What do you think, Sos? What do you think's
So I think
adding?
like this is like a culmination of a few things. I think one of the problems with it is that the defense, like the referees don't allow them to play the defense that they used to be able to play.
Yep.
Like you even see like ticky-tack fouls. A guy will barely even like lay his hand on someone, and they'll call that a foul. I think also the defensive effort also isn't great. Like I think a lot of players, you watch them, they're kind of out there shuffling, they're not putting the same amount of effort that they are on offense, and I think that's like apparent. And I think it kind of, not to get too kind of like off track, but I think a lot of that kind of roots from like kind of the AAU play style.
Yes.
You go and you watch, like it's been going on for a while now, like 10 years, 15 years. You watch like any of these tournaments, play in any of these tournaments. A lot of these guys, they don't play a lick of defense. They just kind of run up, they'll throw an alley-oop off the backboard and dunk. The other team's just waiting on the end just to get the ball and bring it up the court. So I think now you see a lot of those guys who play in that AAU circuit now, like all the guys born in the 2000s, they're all in the NBA now. So that kind of style of play is kind of translating to the NBA. And I don't really think it's a good look, and I don't really think it's like a fun watch either for certain fans. But
I think that's a great point about the AAU that you make. I think another group of players that's influenced this is the European players. Most of the European players nowadays, all the great players in the league, aside from maybe Giannis, they're all offensive hubs that are ridiculous offensive players but aren't really defensive specialists. So when you have all the top players in the league now who are mainly offensive players, it's going to be hard if your best player is only putting his full effort in on one side of the ball, you're going to end up with high scoring averages and also high points averages for the other team.
Yeah, and just to quickly build off like the European point you made, before it used to be kind of like our game over here, like back in the 2000s, and before it was kind of like more dunking, more defense.
Yep.
Where now we play their game. We play threes, we play less defense. And that's why you see a lot of these guys like Luka, Jokic, they're excelling in our league because they're what they play over there is now being played over here, and I think that helps them out a lot. The defense isn't as physical. Well, I know nowadays, arguably, you could argue some of those leagues are harder in terms of defense. I just think it's definitely more of a European game.
Yes, Lucas said so. It was harder.
He said it's easier to score here than it was
here,
back in Europe, which is kind of true because if you look at his EuroLeague stats, he was only putting up, I think, like 18 points a game in the EuroLeague or something like that. Whereas, here he's putting up, 34, 35 a game now.
They're used to playing in Europe, the smaller court, and I think they have less time. And there's no 3-second rule over there. So those rules all favor a lower scoring game.
Yeah, their style of play is definitely more old school. I mean, they still have kind of like traditional centers out there, which now in the NBA, those are almost extinct.
Yes.
You don't have any centers who can't shoot or have no skill. Like that, those guys are pretty much all gone.
Yeah.
And the European game, too, it's also a lot more passing. You don't see guys kind of over there like dribbling the air out of the ball, like chucking up shots. Coaching, I think, is definitely bigger over there, too. Like they're actually they actually listen to the coaches. The coaches actually matter, I think. They have power within the team. So their kind of game is totally different. I think some basketball purists would prefer that compared to maybe some of the NBA, which is more kind of like, running up the court, shooting a three, running back, shooting a three.
Yep.
But I definitely think defense in the NBA has gone down.
Yeah, the evolution of player for sure. I mean, you look at the big men today, you have Jokic and Embiid and those sorts of players who are sort of the first kind of shift in the era where those big men, they're great shooters. They're both unstoppable mid-range and probably better than sufficient three-point shooters. The next wave, we have guys like Chet and Wemby coming in, where you can put Chet Holmgren in the corner and they have to play him. Players like Kristaps Porzingis, 7'3", and people know him as a shooter. People don't know him as, even though he's one of the best post players of this decade. It's really interesting.
Exactly.
The morph of the player.
It's going to draw the zone out, obviously, when you have those guys sitting in the arc, and it makes it a nightmare to guard. One thing that you brought up, Mike, that I will say about the referees, if someone gets hit at all, they're calling the foul. One thing, I mean, this isn't going to add to the scoring necessarily too much, but one thing that I've noticed late in the game is when the referees review certain things and they'll see that in the call, you can't really determine in slow-mo, right, like what's a foul and what's not. Because obviously if you're looking at something in slow motion and you see, oh, someone hit your arm while the shot went up, obviously the referees are going to call that. Whereas when in reality on the court, when we see that as fans, it was just a light call, there's nothing going on there, and then the guys get 2 free throws and that changes the trajectory of the game, at least late on. But that's not entirely related to like scoring in general here, but just like that's just something I know what you were saying before, like the light officiating.
That's going to wrap it up for the day. Make sure you check out some of our other videos and like and subscribe.